I like how you extrapolated Riaz's time. He said joining in 2 minutes and you said 10 or 10 or 15.
He said joining 2 minutes? When did you say that?
It's okay, it's okay.
No,
But
no,
it's accurate. With Riaz, 2 can be
that's
10.
quite right. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote joining in 2. Then he's at 9:57, he says calling in 5 because I had called him.
Yeah.
And then I see a missed call at 9:58, which is like the next minute. It is. I had my phone on silent, so I didn't hear it at all.
No, but it is great joy when you're the person who's receiving his attention. Because he's always, and it's a lot of fun. Anytime you interrupt him, his attention is always there.
Yes, yes. Now this will go to the next group, no?
Yeah.
So we have to make one decision, Sudipto, whether we take it through that stage of user or whether we straight away send it back to the original group which made the core values.
Yeah.
Now today is Monday and Saturday is our we could have a very brief user input, but I don't know because many groups have already thought about users and to some extent they are hi Riyadh. So maybe we can skip that step.
Yeah, I was thinking that if we are sending it back to the core values group, maybe they could do a short user analysis or use case scenario.
Though Sudipto, I would be very keen that it immediately goes into a kind of three-dimensionality and a solidity of a certain kind before and much more of mental work is not going to add to the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has understood concepts perfectly, better than I could ever have if I was at that stage of my career. Yes, and they've done a great job with that. But there is something which needs to come into their work, and which I think can only happen if we change the mode of discussion, mode of presentation, etc.
Yeah. I think that they are thinking first and drawing later. That has to change. That you have to draw first and think later. And thinking
or at least simultaneously.
Yes.
Or at least simultaneously.
Or at least simultaneously. Yeah.
Drawing itself is a mode of thought.
Yes. One can sense that you're trying to represent what you have thought, what you have discussed, and that will only take you so far. It will not open up possibilities for reimagining or reinterpreting drawings. So I think today's session is that way going to be important for us to understand how drawing can itself become a way of exploration in design. Riaz, I was actually calling you when I did earlier. Sorry, my phone was on silent. I didn't see your missed call. It was to ask you for a few of those drawings that you had done for the one competition that happened in Delhi. Spire something. You know what I'm talking about.
ChaiPoché. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted some of those drawings if I could add it to a presentation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll do that. I'll do that right away.
The Spirotech people are working also in my office in case you want that one.
That's also a very nice set
Shilpa
of
is there.
drawings.
Shilpa is part of the group that won the. Yeah.
Yeah. So since I don't have Keynote, I sent your link to Vignesh.
No, but it's okay. I have people who will help me share screen. If I have a problem, they'll come in and sort
Great.
it out.
So I think I'm recording the session, so we can surely begin.
Yes. Okay. So let me try share screen. And I want this one. Share. Is the screen visible?
Quite, yes, it's visible, very much.
Okay, so I'm calling this presentation Our Ways of Getting Over Design Worry and Hesitation. All of us suffer from this from time to time, or almost continuously if we are in bad shape. And over a period of time, I have developed, or we have developed together, all those people who have been working with me. Together we have developed this, overcoming the lonely search for originality. I think this is our main goal, that the considering the work of architecture to be a work of superb originality, which brings you name and fame and all that, is something that we gave up long ago. And plunging into and becoming participants in the unending stream of searchers. So there is an unending stream of people who have been before us and are going to come after us. And we are just plunging into that stream. So there's no name to the project. And you can forget the owner of the project. The project is owned by the whole world. This is how we began to think about getting over design worry, because otherwise you think, oh, what will people say about me? How will I, show that I'm, etc. So this is the process that I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you 3 projects. One most recent, another which dates from about 2003, and the third one which dates from about 1990s, 95, 96. And I realized that my whole life I've been doing this process. So I'll show you. So the first step is what I call metaphors. And in our case, we call them core values. So the core values, when understood, they can create metaphors, architectural metaphors, will be eventually triggered off by this kind of a modality. And then you have meta concepts, or the same thing. So it is understanding the ethos of a place, its core values, out of an initial understanding of place, its history and possible futures, human civilizations and its forms, the existence of sentient and insentient phenomena, the questions of equity, justice, and resilience, and finally the attitudes that will suit the identified ethos. So these mega concepts are usually verbal, but may also be diagrammatic. This we did in the first 2 stages. So I'm going to show you Shrishti, where we thought about what is this place of community of learners and practitioners. That's what the Shrishti people told us. We want to become a community of learners and practitioners. So we used Arshia Sattar's analysis of the 3 cities of the Ramayana. the city of ethical values, the city of aesthetic values, and the city of productive values. And these three we made into the ruling metaphors out of the understanding of all that was, for example, said that, you know, the architecture will have so and so, it will be based on simplicity and frugality, all cycles of resource use will be, you know, all that was integrated into these three kinds of big metaphors. The city that is Ayodhya, Kishkinda, and Lanka. From there comes the metaphor. The metaphor that triggers architectural expression, and a program skeleton emerges. So the metaphor is a juxtaposition of concrete images, not abstract concepts. Images are not necessarily visual, but they are concretely experienceable. And in architectural work, they often take the form of symbolically rich typologies. This says the same thing in other words. But the important thing to keep in mind is that these are vivid images of experience. They're not sort of abstract thoughts put together. In poetry, the image; in painting, the image; in sculpture, the image; in music, the image. In all cases, there is a sound image or a tactile image or a verbal image, but that image recalls something, and you juxtapose at least two images to make a metaphor. So, in Shrishti's case, and you remember that this is worked by a group of people, so you need some anchors. So I gave, in the office we discussed and we came upon 4 titles. One, the village of designers. Now, village gives rise to certain imagery. Designers gives rise to another set of well understood forms of action. And both of these are images. Then the community of creative households. Now, a community is understood, household is understood. And so we didn't call it departments, it is households. Now, this starts building up an image in the mind of whoever is working. A forest of many species. That's the third metaphor. And the fourth one, the constellation in a starry sky. In the sky, there are all kinds of stars. Just as in an institution, there might be all kinds of, different kinds of work going on. But the constellation is seen by individuals. Out of the shining of those stars, they start seeing patterns. And in the same way, the Srishti student who has a choice is able to create her own constellation. This was again 2 very distinct images brought together. So these are the metaphors. This is substantiated or supported by some of the discussions that we had with Srishti people. So they said we need knowledge and information hubs, we need learning hubs, we need making hubs, and we need living hubs. And this whole language, to my mind, was so tired and it was so full of managerial jargon that it needed transformation into the metaphors. And that's what we did. Then the next step is choosing a set of templates of scale, space, configuration. That means, in very blunt terms, we select plans from anywhere. Cutting, pasting, extending, modifying, assembling, till the template itself disappears and now appears in a new form. So it's a tinkering with form. So we pick up anything, African villages, European towns, buildings that we know of, Fatehpur Sikri, any building, it doesn't matter. it is more like stumbling upon. The choice does not mean something more. It doesn't mean a cultural identity that we are choosing, but it's really a way of using successful examples. So we have to know those examples have succeeded in creating appropriate scales, relationships of form, and of configuration or layout to understand the texture of an intended fabric. So this is the third step. So again, this says the same thing. So now let's look at what was done in the office, the village of designers. And you can see that there are plans cannibalized from various places, from Khan to anything. I mean, it doesn't matter. And they're all plans which have shown that there can be scales put together, there can be configurations of certain kinds. This is the village of large Havelis, each of a different discipline of work, to which there is a section as well. The section is extremely important, so that this is not just a diagram, a graphical representation. Remember that the space between the buildings, it is all to scale. You can see the scale at the bottom. There is a north arrow. All of these things are taken into account in translating the metaphor by using, and we use Xeroxes quite a lot. We produce the plans to the same scale and then Xerox them, then cut them, paste them. So there is no worry about whether this plan is right or wrong. It becomes something which is exploratory. See the section now. And this section faithfully works with the plan which is there, but it takes some liberties. Now let's look at the second metaphor, the community of creative households. And these households are like large, gharanas. And each gharana has, you can see at the top, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 gharana houses. And then there are the public facilities that the community has. And all of, you can see, if you stretch your thought process, you will be able to see the sources of the plans. Though we have tried that, you cannot make it out. But it's a very enjoyable process where there is no responsibility whatsoever. This whole question of responsibility is something that bothers me. So those are the sections that develop out of that. Each Haveli has a courtyard, and the courtyard is the key core space, etc., etc. It doesn't matter. You don't have to explain it like this. You can see it in the 3 dimensions. Scales are extremely important. And we are, in all our discussions in the office, the discussion is about whether it's too big, too far, too near, too compact, and whether it should be even more compact, that kind of thing. The forest of many species. Now this has, like trees, certain supports which become and then all kinds of other creatures accrete to it, to these supports. And it forms a kind of a variation within the forest. And you get that, and look at the section there. You'll see it in more detail just now. Now that's the forest of many species has happened here now. Don't worry, it's not stopped. It's just that something is happening. Now you can see that the ground and the sky are both considered as significant registers of the nature of an activity. And of course, the monkeys and other creatures are there, which is just for fun. And in real life also, they are there. In Bangalore, you find them. We end with the 2 cows peacefully grazing. And then the constellation in the starry sky. Here, the real rigorous English people at Cambridge, their plans have been used, Leslie Martin and so on. But that doesn't matter. So that's what it looks like. And then settling into the context, topography, vegetation, orientation. I call this remembering, putting the members together again. And settling in is like a body adjusting itself to a location, a room or a chair, and to the presence of other bodies. So inside, this is what happens. So this we did along with Srishti faculty.
No, because the notion
So we have
of
made
this
these
itself
little
really
houses.
opens up, see the possibilities of all these terraces.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, because we are not.
And we told them that it was from the North Karnataka house type, so they were very happy.
Because it can happen outdoors. You don't need actually. And also, we can have
More of those.
Yes,
They will happen.
Yeah.
So, Ravi's idea is good.
There is a general
And
Ravindran
total
may not,
reskilling
1 is to
for the-
250.
General Ravindran may not be
We need to have some lesser of
You know,
doors here,
except
I
they
think.
close the door
And
which
there
goes
will
up.
be slightly
No,
bigger.
I mean,
So
most
let's
school
make
administrators
this
don't like
They don't like it.
Why?
Not
As
like
the
that.
door is opened up and they have their parties.
Then some iniquity.
So rescale this and imagine that in
ये वो सब उधर जाके करते
This
हैं.
form of collaborative activity is something which is very, very
This one,
enjoyable.
Yes.
the enclosed terraces.
Yeah, yeah.
Classrooms.
And then
There are all
visible also.
classrooms. Yeah.
This is like a Jodhpur
Extended
house.
classroom.
Yeah.
So this is what Ravi was saying. These become those studios where the live meeting or whatever we call it happens.
Sudipto, your Jodhpur house came in also.
That school related.
Could we say that in like the industrial, there is
I saw that.
there is a step which allows this kind of an industrialization. You know, if so, we are going back to. I mean, if you're saying this design of a Saurashtra house, if we could imagine that large things were being made in that culture,
Yes.
what is with that design?
See, what did they do? They
Go down. I mean,
So then that went into a model, and that went into studies of how it fits into the site, what it does to the water, etc., etc., etc. Next one. This is something we were given 4 days to complete. My partner Sohan's guru is a musician, but a very important Karnataka intellectual. And he wanted us to do the competition for the Kannada University, which was to be near Hampi. And there were only 4 days before the final date of submission when he told us. We also realized that only sons of the soil were allowed to take part in the competition. And we were ineligible, but he said, no, you put it in. I want an entry from you guys. So we had to do it. So what we did was, just previous to that, we had studied and made, won a competition for Anegondi. And we looked at the palace at Vijayanagara and we abstracted out the principles of it. And from that becomes something that we said each faculty or each department really will be a reflection of the kind of palace that you find at Anegondi or at Hampi. And so here, for example, here's the Faculty of Science. And I mean, we just took Xeroxes of those plans, cut them, redrew them, and within a day or two, we made all this. But the overall idea was to do the idea of the city on the hill, the university as the city on the hill. And so there, we had photographs of this landscape. And on top of that, we simply took a pen and drew the landscape and drew the city on top. And it starts becoming something like that. There was a lake and the roads were known, and our project starts adjusting. Sometimes these 4 stages are simultaneous. And we start getting the city of 4 quarters. Cities, you know, all cities have 4 quarters. And the street running from top to bottom is the academic street. And the street running from left to right is the social street, where there'll be cafes and things like that. And at the bottom is the space of recreation. At the top is the library and the Senate Hall. And all the departments are made out of the same. So we took drawings of Pattadakal, Hampi, etc., which are there in the books, Xerox them, cut them, re-put them. And the only thing we did was to draw this elevation, which you see at the bottom, out of the same things, which we, now this is another set of houses, and you can see the same theme, variant. And so, and this is all done with Xeroxes. But the scales we got from the actual buildings which we had experienced, and we knew that they work. And that's the city as a whole. Now you can see on the left-hand side is the lake and the recreational area, where we have stolen the pavilions from the elephant stables area of Hampi. You can see those towers. These are directly lifted, as are some of the buildings in that. And there is no shame in stealing, as far as I'm concerned. Then the last project I want to show is the craft park at Kutch, in Kutch, which is a project which has been built. And there, first the understanding of all that needed to be done there, which leads to a programmatic sort of metaphor, and the program components and so on. So we are trying to understand what kind of place it would be. And there then the first most important thing comes up, the weave of the village as the master metaphor. Because it's a weaving community in many places in fact. And then we looked at different models of organizing this. So there are houses, there's a school or a college, there's the weave of the village, there is the mohalla. And finally we said, we will make 3 villages to check out what we are doing. So these have houses from Ethiopia, houses from Kutch, houses from all over the world, now Xeroxed, shaded, colored, repasted, and cut and modified as we felt. So you can't make out which part is from Ethiopia, which part is from where, but it's a Kutchi village now. So this was one village. Both of these villages have one major street with 2 ends. But the clients liked this village, which was where it was possible to get lost. And that's what they wanted. And so we went forward with that. We started working in 3rd dimension on the site. We started creating possible sort of spatial forms. We remembered the first visit to the site, what we had seen, and how the rolling landscape suggested something, and what came about as a final project. So you can see here that there is a very, very simple process of using existing architecture and its lessons, but not using it directly, but using it in a form of recomposition, but always driven by some notion about where we are going, anchored in some metaphor which is concrete. Yeah.
This was so impressive. And I was just wondering, like probably we can just have this presentation once more so that more people can also benefit from it. Because right now we are just,
We can upload it on
uh,
the. I'll
sir,
put it
upload,
in Veranda. Shall I put
yeah,
it in Veranda? I'll put a PPT version. This is a key version, dot key.
yeah, I think, will in any case, we'll be having the video because more important is the explanation which you gave. And the starting, I mean, the first slide in itself was like, as if it's opening a completely new door to everything, and which is actually a very, very relevant thing because we are not looking at this competitive future now. It's so, it has to be so much like collaborative. Otherwise, we'll just lose everything. I mean,
but even if ethically we are not convinced about that, it's good to accept that Baba, we are small people. अरे क्या करेंगे छोटे मोटे चीज को इकट्ठा करके कुछ निकलेगा. I mean, I'm willing to go between those two extremes. One as a very ethical notion of cooperative work, which I fully believe in, and the notion of anonymity of great architecture. Anonymity meaning you don't remember who did it, but you say, oh, what a place.
Yeah, like Vedas and Upanishads, I mean, they're completely anonymous. Usually we can't subscribe, I mean, one person to that. And it's a collective work which has developed over. And similarly, I think this talk also, this Ranjit Hotsoke.
Yes, he talked about the oral tradition. Yes.
Absolutely. When he says, no, I'm the beneficiary of so much of scholarship which has already happened and which is happening. I absolutely love this phrase. It's so important to recognize how privileged we are at this point. Because we are receiving so much from everywhere. And all we just have to do is probably just take it along. I mean, obviously not on we can't carry such a burden on single shoulder. So it has to be collective.
But I was more keen that the concreteness and the palpability of architecture is conveyed through this. Yes, it is really important. The palpability and the tactility, the sense that bodies are entering and moving through the space, and that it has significant impact on human beings. I think that is something that really must come across.
But I agree.
In fact, what was sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying that I agree with Mansi that first slide with those little texts were quite eye-opening. Yeah, the title.
As much as I agree with both of them, what I really enjoyed was the fun you're having in that section, and the way that the roofs and yet the commitment to all that the text said, the forest, the way the character kind of changes, and I think that the ability to actually the practice of taking an image, as you said, and playing with it. Seems to be a fun that we are, I don't know, I think that we have to have again, just the whole kind of...
Yes, one more thing, because it was so condensed, sir, in few slides, you have like really condensed this rich experience of yours. I mean, at least on these projects. So I found it so condensed, like we didn't even have the time of reflection on each slide. It just went like, it just passed by Zoom. So I mean, there was so much to take away from whatever little in immediately I could grasp.
You know, but
Yeah.
most working experiences have been like that 4 days for doing a competition of a whole university. Or, in Srishti, I'm really in an advisory capacity. I'm not even their architect, but I'm just trying to hold the faculty together towards creating an impact on the architect. And so there's few engagements and with few hours, because you see, I'm not being paid for that, so I have to do it fast. And that kind of a speed also is very important, because just imagine, a poet doesn't think for ages about a line. He suddenly, on the spur of the moment, just take something like Eliot's line: April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land. Now see what metaphors he has constructed. April, concrete, experiential. To the European, April would be a particular type of month, lilacs, and then dead land. Now, if breeding dead land, so there is an imagery there which is so tight and so immediate, and you can't agonize over it. You can't agonize over metaphors. Metaphors come in the moment of relaxation, in the moment of joking almost. As Ria said, enjoying it.
Any questions, any concerns where you felt you were disturbed by this? Any you felt your encroaching on
Functionalities.
your values or your whatever you might have learned in college?
नहीं, चोरी तो करी की थी ना, इतना तो वो एथिकल भी नहीं था. इथियोपिया से चोरी किया, वहाँ वो इटली में चला गया, कहीं से भी चोरी करके आ गया आदमी. तो ऐसे तो कैसे चलेगा? हाँ, Sudipto, you remember in studios, Riaz and Sudipto will both remember that this notion of chori was a very wonderful notion. It gave you a double satisfaction. One, that nobody knew that you had done it, and two, you had made it your own. This entering into that stream of what he said it very nicely, Ranjit, but like that, but there was a sort of honoring of the predecessors. Here, there is a kind of pulling the nose of the predecessor. And that is a wonderful kind of relationship to our predecessors and to our future as well.
I was just thinking, I mean, how does the ethical issue really comes up? Because, everything is in context. So when we are actually trying to focus on work, I mean, not, as you said, anonymous workers, it's more like everyone is more concerned about the work. And when there is not any name attached to it, and when we are taking from the past or whoever has earlier done, substantial work and building up on it. So, I mean, I still feel like beneficiary, and at the same time what you are saying, that also I understand. It's this playful relationship also with, because sometimes the past is venerated so much that we have a blockage to also, play with it. You just don't want to enter those lines. You feel a little intimidated because that is such an I mean, that's what my feeling was when I was studying. I don't think I could have ever used the plans by such, big architects. So in such a playful manner, it's almost like, creating a caricature of gods. I mean, there would be a lot of protest against it. So I think it's again, I mean, I'm finding this so wonderful. I mean, every point, something or the other, it's like, you know, this studio is being very revelating for me. I mean, it's loosening up so many knots. I had mentioned it to Sudipto in a message, but because even this thing is so important to have a healthy, you know, to have a very healthy relationship with the past is very important if you really want to create something interesting in future, or at least participate in the process of creation, because create means again it has this ego sort of.
You know, the vernacular tradition is not at all bothered about much of this. Like in Ahmedabad, there is a shop called Old Jasuben Pizza. Yeah? Now, that Old Jasuben Pizza is a very interesting pizza. And those who are in favor of Old Jasuben Pizza, they will never eat the pizzas from, Pizza Hut
Jasuben.
or any of the things, you know. Because the old Jasuban pizza uses a bhakri, which is a hard Gujarati chapati, on which he lapedwa finds the, some kind of Gujarati sweet concoction of tomato, and then puts in Amul cheese on top, which becomes like, crisp. That processed cheese, when you cook, it becomes brown and all that. And now people, those who are used to that, they don't consider the other thing a pizza at all. So the vernacular, or you look at music, for example, there are rags which came from, like Mand. Mand was sung by the Rajasthani, wandering minstrels. And somebody picked it up, and you hear Ali Akbar Khan Sahib's Mishra Mand, and it's like there. It's really gone somewhere. And this kind of thing, the oral tradition has done it all the time. And it is only the formalization um, of the kind of individual personality who becomes a celebrity that has created all these problems. And otherwise, it was always, these classical musicians, when they sing, they're fantastic claim as opposed to architects. Architects will say, whatever I'm doing is completely original, new, you know. And but the Khasab will say, and he will hold his ears like this. हमारे बुजुर्गों ने जो सिखाया था, हमारे उस्ताद ने जो सिखाया था, वही गा रहा हूँ. मैं कुछ नया नहीं कर रहा हूँ, कुछ नया नहीं कर रहा हूँ. And then he will start singing new completely. And that, I think, is a wonderful attitude. So, but then they know the notes. It's not just that attitude, it is the training of the voice, it is the whole sense of the form of music, which you do again and again and again to reach that. And I think this part has to come into the studio. This iterative riyaz of the three-dimensional. Unless it is there, our work remains only ideas, more like an advertising brochure. Sorry about that.
Professor Chai, I had put up also a presentation kind of from different parts, and it was talking about a little different thing. So I think it might also be interesting for the students to see.
Yeah.
Of course, it's got your slides as well, so which I will quickly gloss over because you've already spoken about them. So is it a good time you think I should, if I could bring that up right now? Or
I think so. I think so.
Okay. So this is, okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, so this is more to do with the drawing itself, the act of drawing itself. And this is, of course, sketches drawn by children who witnessed the World War and the kind of immediacy with which they draw, or as Picasso had said, every child is an artist, but it's how you kind of retain the artist as you grow up, which becomes the problem, because there are all kinds of complications, things which are in between you and what you are imagining. And I think that these kind of drawings which the kids had done in Spain, and there is this tunnel which has been dug below, where whatever is happening on top, all the kind of bombing, but there is a tunnel below where people are kind of escaping and the soldiers are escaping and so on. And these kind of very vivid sketches. So the whole idea started the whole idea starts with a sketch, right? But yeah, this is another kind of a thing that we used to do as kids. We used to roll these paper sculptures, paper snakes, and this was our first sculpture that we ever did, was the snake. Everyone probably did the snake, and we used to love doing the snakes because it was easy, and once it came out, it was evocative. You could feel the snake, you could twist it around your finger, and so on and so forth. But drawing a snake, a child never draws a snake. This is also a kind of a very interesting thing, that the child does not draw a snake. And why a child does not draw a snake is something that the child actually tries to draw a snake, but it doesn't look like a snake. It looks like an earthworm, because the child does not have something that. So my grandfather narrated a story about his teacher Nandalal Bose in Shantiniketan, who was asked, how do you draw a snake which is different from, let's say, a rope? And sorry, this is a digital drawing, but just to kind of prove a point that the snake is different from a rope. So Nandalal Bose told him that you have to become the snake when you're drawing. So your hand has to have that acceleration and that little vicious snap at the end of it. So the difference between drawing a rope and drawing a snake is that you become the snake when you draw the snake, and you do not, or if you don't do anything, then you basically draw a rope, and that's the difference. So I mean, all of us start our drawings with sketches, and only sketches that we know and we imagine what they are, and we have to explain it to others what it is and what it means. But in those sketches, as we draw them, it's a simultaneous process of exploring and thinking about space, thinking about relationships, and oftentimes the building that kind of comes up falls short of this first sketch. So here is Frank Gehry drawing on top of a building which has become such a success, but it still falls short of his expectation of what the sketch perhaps was at the beginning, because in his mind it was something far more potent. So I think that the first sketch cannot be forgotten, and the first sketch is important because it really kind of sets up relationships and drawings and diagrams and so on. Professor Doshi also spoke about the thick line and the charcoal, which kind of opens up possibilities beyond the line, because the line becomes specific. The charcoal opens up possibilities. It opens up ways of imagining a drawing which is not limited to what you had initially set out to portray. And this, for example, this sketch is you can already sense perspective, you can sense space, you can sense different kind of sectional details and so on, which you might not have thought about when you did a charcoal sketch like this. Then there are, of course, diagrammatic themes, and diagrammatic themes are also useful because they are intriguing. They are intriguing, and they pull the other person into that intrigue of what you might have done. They allow people to ask questions. They allow people to kind of come into that space of the drawing. So, I mean, we were talking of the collage, and Professor Chaya has introduced that whole idea of stitching together, spaces, imaginations together. And this is a section which also does that in a creative kind of a way. I don't know if it's a speculative section or it's an actual section of a site study, but whatever it might be, it looks like it's been pieced together from different imaginations, and each of these can then spark off a different imagination of a different kind.
So, the very important thing about this sketch or this collage is that it is coherent in it's not a set of images side by side. It is now forming one single city.
Yes.
Which you can understand actually. You can go off into the, the staircases which are coming down, or you can go under that underpass, or you can enter these buildings. And all of these are ways of entering the actual space, which is continuous. I think this is a very, very good example.
Yes. Then this is also, it looks like something that's pieced together, but in its specificity, it evokes practices, functions, mythologies of a kind which you yourself can probably look at this for half an hour and imagine different stories kind of housed within them. So again, the part which Professor Chai just spoke about, the previous section, that it may be a Frankenstein monster which is pieced together, but it has a being, it has a wholesome kind of a personality, and that idea of it becoming something by itself, an individual, that is something that is important and must be kept in mind, that it's not a fragmented thing. Again, very evocative kind of drawings. These drawings, are speaking of relationships, and of course the intrigue of those relationships. They may or may not mean anything. They may be done as an artist's kind of a exploration, but it opens up worlds, and it opens up curiosity, and you start imagining things. And it's quite possible that you do this, and I have done this in parts and pieces, where you start drawing from the top and you finish at the bottom, and you allow your body and your hand to do the thinking for you, and it just kind of it becomes something, because you at that point are not controlling your hand. And this is also, I find, a very, very valuable way of moving within your own kind of explorations, where and of course, I mean, one iteration may not be enough, and one thing opens up another, and you'll try another one and another one, and it kind of starts to unravel into something very beautiful. This I'm not too sure about, but again, this has an interesting potential, which I'm unable to put my finger whether this particular piece has achieved it or not. But it seems that the idea of a plan then that is overlaid with materiality, or with texture, and the texture is reminiscent of spaces, it's reminiscent of cultures, could also be an interesting way of looking at space. This is leading me to another way, which is I find that a lot of you have started doing, is to kind of piece together stories which are relationships which are a little further from each other, and then they are kind of bound together by movement, bound together by lines, bound together by things which are could be an interesting way of exploring an entire larger site. And so this is an artist called Julian Segard, who's done this piece in a power plant. And this is a project that, of course, I was involved with. So this is a mural, and this happens to be the cafeteria space, but it's a mural where he's talking about the production of steel, and he's talking about it in his own way of kind of, things that are happening. And it's a kind of a mind map of sorts, which, which also are revealing. I mean, there are horses, there are, what are the horses for? And of course, I know the story of the horse, but you can imagine what is the relationship between a horse and a steel. And there are so many different stories that come to mind, but you can make your own story, it doesn't matter. But there are pieces of coal, there are steel, there is scrap, there is trusses, and along with it, there are kind of diagrams at the back which are layered on top of this. And the same artist, not the one on the left, but on the right, does this kind of work with, he picks up scrap plywood and cement sheets and tin sheets, and he puts them together and he draws above them. And this is, on the right hand side, you can see the pylons of Delhi's flyovers and the kind of pipes which kind of go through. And, there's an interesting kind of a materiality to the whole imagery, which is adding to what one has imagined about these machinations within the city. The pipes, the pylons, found materials, scrap yards, all of that kind of things. One more of those flyover or under the flyover drawings. And this is a technique, the whole collage idea is also a technique which can at some time become completely theoretical. And this is Daniel Libeskind from his earliest collage drawings of 3 years between 67 and 1970, where he's obviously taking these drawings from other people and putting them together as a collage, and then more importantly, synthesizing them to some kind of a wholesome or an intelligible kind of a space, which is put together with these fragments of different works of Corbusier, no doubt. But, and of course, Professor Chaya's, what he's already shown you, but again, very, very intriguing ways where things are coming together. And what is important somehow is the space that is kind of the space that kind of emerges between the black lines. So the black lines are not important anymore. It's the white between the blacks which are becoming very, very intriguing.
By the way, this is Varkey's design, that one.
This one?
The library, yes, which I didn't show. The library and the Senate Hall. Varkey was very, very, I think, very romantic about the idea of the procession at the time of graduation. In fact, prior to him, there was no graduation ceremony except. And he wanted to have actually a path going up the hill, and you reached the Senate Hall and were given your degree. So here he got it done.
Mm-hmm.
Except it was impossible. No hill available.
Just letting this sit in for a while, because I'm sure we all want to see this a little bit more.
You can see the cryptic cellular drawings on the left-hand side. So each building is considered a kind of cell with a nucleus, and so this was the person who was working on it had his own agenda, which somehow came into it.
I thought they were the railway thalis that you get on trains.
No, that the trees one, the section is a different person. Plans are of another. Plans are from community
I was
of.
talking about microscopic drawings, those amoebic drawings, the cellular. I thought they were the thalis that you get South Indian.
Yeah.
Yes. Papad on one side and
yeah. Maybe he also had that in mind. He's quite mischievous. Both of these guys are. So things get done in the office which you never even thought of, and then suddenly they are there in the final presentation.
you have to explain
make a joke of it.
Did you have to explain it to your to the people at
station? Oh yes. But there is a very good explanation. They enjoyed it thoroughly, of course, because we talked about the cell, and we talked about the nucleus and all, and everybody thinks, wow, it's so serious and nice. And then this section, they could see the monkeys and other things going all over the place. But we talked about the fact that work and residents should not be separated, and the students should live in this world of and it was like absolute success.
This was another one which I didn't see in your presentation, but I thought was quite interesting as well.
Yes. It's about water, wastewater, all the kinds of waters. Because they had this sustainability agenda, so we had to produce something to go for that also. Which I mean, sustainable you must make, of course, but it should be some juicy stuff.
Yeah.
वो एक्वीफर में कैसे जाता है वो सब हो ना.
So this also looks like a roof which collects water, the one on top.
Yeah.
Now this is from Riaz, and I just received these, and again very kind of Riaz, tell me, talk about this on the left, the plan. Is it also some kind of a collage technique that you've used?
Well, not as in the same manner that Professor Chaya was talking about, but with two, as Professor Chaya said, metaphors. One was quite literally, and I think shaping the ground, which is what we wanted to suggest we were doing, both in the crayon images that you see with the brown part drawn in an earthy manner, but also in the way that the plan was drawn in the middle. So just to give it a little context, there was some very simple, and if you see the plan, there is very simple office-like blocks, which were part 6 of them, which you see forming 2 L formations. And we really wanted to infest it. We wanted to kind of make it into a completely other organism. So really we were thinking of ourselves as an earth parasite that was going to take over these piloti and so on and so forth. And the whole kind of drawing had to be in that manner. And yet, I mean, we wanted to kind of also suggest that it's possible to be taking care of space considerations and so on. So you get this kind of mix. But really what we were talking about is what happens. There are three layers in this scheme. What happens when you're on the ground, what happens when you're in the middle space, and what happens when you go up. And that's as simple as a sequence as it is. And then where we've hollowed out things is the important part for us. So that's largely what it is. To make things a little bit unclear.
I'm magnifying parts. I hope they are getting magnified similarly in your screen.
Yes. But this, like Professor Chaya, was done in, I think, in a week's time. So, I mean, we did spend a lot of time in the office thinking about it as the competition deadline came closer and closer. But the actual production of everything happened within about a week.
Mm.
And I think, Sudipta, what you were saying, you were talking about the child's drawing. And I think that, and you talked about how, you take the role of plasticine or clay and you roll the snake. And it's easy and it's satisfying. And I think there's something to this because, I mean, when we are working very quickly, and when you have a lot of time, you tend to think that making something meaningful comes out of very complex ideas. But actually, I think what you said about taking something very simple and playing with it, and that I don't know if complexity is the right word, but the richness comes out of playing and not by what you choose to start with. I think that's really because otherwise it gets all kind of, there's not, I mean, if you imagine that you have a very complex set of materials that you have to start with, then play becomes very important because you have to plan how each material comes together or its own process and so on. So, I mean, I find that taking something simple and easy is a very good place to start.
And this is a different project. This is the competition for School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. And I asked Riyaz to.
Sudipta, I'm still seeing the old sheet. Yeah. Sorry.
It's probably going to take a little while to kind of.
Yeah, it's
Network is especially poor today. Yes, your voice is crackling up and all of that. Anyway, so sorry, you want to say something about this, Riyaz? Okay,
no, but I wanted to say something about the previous one.
Yeah,
that
I'll go back. Yeah.
There are two themes. One is the theme of assembly, which is in those L of offices all around. And the other is the theme of excavation. These two complementary themes are working wonders with the design.
Yeah.
And I think it shows in the drawing that the sky is actually carved out in the top sketch in color. The sky is carved out. It doesn't exist before. You carve it out. And the light is carved out and all of that. And then the assembled part is the kind of box in which it comes. It's a very wonderful sort of complementarity here. And such things which are actual architectural actions, they make very important stages in design process.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think there are textures, colors, all of this kind of put together in a manner that is quite exciting and revelatory.
Sudhita, I just want to say that these were we took simple SketchUp models to get the blockingness to be reasonably accurate and made hand sketches over that. And then tried to get a sense of it by just using simple magazine cutouts. So these were all very quick. I mean, as you do in a competition deadline. And then I think a very important part of it is to hope for the best. So
I think this whole idea of cutting, and the whole idea of subtracting, of finding something and then finding something anew by removing parts of it is something that I want to just discuss with the work of this fellow, Gordon Mataclark, and who lived for very few years, unfortunately, but did this kind of wonderful. He would go in with a drill and a cutter into buildings and cut these things out of spaces in a manner that you, so these are buildings which are about to be demolished. So he would kind of ask uh, the builder or the demolisher that if he could, at his own risk, cut away parts of it before they brought it down. And this is the kind of spaces that he would uh, discover within those very, very banal kind of constructions. But look at this excitement, and look at the title: the Circus or the Caribbean Orange. And of course, um, one wonders where this can lead to. The sense of ruins and the idea of ruins as something that you discover, but it kind of fulfills an imagination that is more than what the original building might have been, is very curious as a phenomenon, that it completes something in your own mind. And the incompleteness actually helps to complete something. The other part is your own mind, which kind of goes and plugs into that incompleteness. And I think that sense of open-endedness is something that we have to look at a drawing for that. So yeah, I think that was the end. Sorry, quick cobble together in the morning. So excuse the jagged edges in that.
Great stuff. It's a good start to the week, huh?
Guys, any reactions? Any questions? The idea is to motivate you all. So I assume through the day we will be having discussions individually, or do we already kind of circulate the exercises between the groups? What do you think, Riaz? We send it back to the originators of the core values?
Just one sec. Sorry. Sudipta, I just wanted to say something on your presentation. So,
please.
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think it's like wonderfully constructed because you've actually given a lot of, ideas of presentation or expression, which one can use in the drawings, and the kind of, and seeing these different styles together. I think it's all the more interesting because one understands because they're evocative in a different way, and they are pretty different from each other. And I didn't know about this person before, so obviously that's an introduction to, for me, this.
Gordon Matlock.
Yes. So no, so I think, and some of the drawings, I think, some of the drawings were like really beautiful. They just didn't even require, I would say, any sort of text, just to put any. They in themselves felt so complete. 2 or 3 drawings, and I think so, there must be more, but the ones which I could perceive, I'm just talking of them. Uh, I just don't know how to give the reference. On one slide, you had, I think they are your drawings. Just before, you had shown that plano with where you said you were not very sure about how the materials, if that's the best example to give or not. Just before that slide,
before
there are
those excavated drawings. No, they're not mine.
Yes.
They're from internet resources. They're not mine.
Okay.
But yeah, the kind of underground excavated spaces, right? Yeah.
Underground, yeah, excavated spaces, the sections, and also the Riaz. I think I like those sketches also because I don't know, but just looking at those images, they somewhere. Historically, like those, that particular, it just somehow evoke that sense of this architecture in Afghanistan. I don't know. I mean, it probably excavation and then this portion putting, somewhere. I will share some images. I have them in my mind, but I don't have them. I'll have to look for them on internet, and then so that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, Riaz, you might have been a Pathan. You don't know. Maybe.
Who knows? Who knows?
Hmm.
But Mansi, I think one of the important things is, I mean, I was thinking when Professor Chaya was talking about assembly and carving, and I think that there are ideas uh, which are there as part of that metaphors that Sir was talking about, and some of them are that at the time that you're making the drawing is not in your head. But I mean, when I think about it, when Sir talked about, I know that those are concerns that we've had at other times in other projects and so on and so forth. And I think that the point I want to make is that at the time that you're drawing, the interpretation is not important. It is the material and the kind of uh, uh, I don't know, the shaping of it and the fact that you engage with it. That is, of course, at times you have to zoom out and look at it and whether it's making sense. But in the enjoyment of the process of working, interpretation tends to cut things up. Whereas really, the word that Sudipto used was that it's a process of synthesis that you're involved in. You had so many ideas at the time of speculating about things, as you guys have, and at the end, you're trying to bring all of them together. And I think that if you start interpreting your own work, it is detrimental to the process. That's for later. It's a fun that you have later with other people, like we're having now. At that point of time, neither were we thinking about carving or assembly. We were simply thinking, sense is okay. As Professor Chaya is saying, this needs to open up a little bit more. This is a little closer. It is literally like that. You're shaping and you're within the disciplinary thinking of an architect. I mean, it looks like a building. I mean, it's not the earth, and yet it's the earth. So I mean, what I'm saying is that it's really important not to try and analyze it, overanalyze it, because analysis is, and you do that, and we've done it now for 3.5 weeks, is a process of taking things apart. And it's great fun to take things apart. And I mean, if I take Victor's analogy of the child, every child wants to take everything apart. The real difficult part is putting it all back together in a sensible way. And we are all trying to do that without losing that fun of taking it apart. So I think that, I would say that to enjoy the interpretation and the analysis part is enjoyable. At this point of time, it's actually detrimental to the process.
Yeah, I can just try to understand this, because seriously, this is a new realm for me. I have never worked this way before. So it's a lesson that I'll be taking away from the studio, but I can understand like this. I mean, I would be very happy to.
No, Mansi, you're not taking it away. You are doing it for the next 5 days. Okay.
Okay.
Let's make this very clear that whatever you take away, that's for later. These next 5 days, this is what you're contributing to the studio. Okay. Is that you will, and the point is not that you will suddenly know how to do it, but you will do it for these 5 days. I'm just putting it out there.
If day before yesterday, if you had asked me about those 4 or 5 slides I put at the beginning about metaphors and so on and so forth, I couldn't have told you anything. And Riaz is 100% right that in the heat of making, all these things are somewhere in the background. I mean, all your life you are thinking about things and they go into the background. At that time you are making. And it's only yesterday night that I sat and tried to put it in a format that a student could understand and not feel like,
And knowing Professor Chaya, if there is another bunch of students at another point in time, it will be reshaped completely. I'm just saying that the interpretations can be different.
Yeah. I can give you another story for the same slides, by the way.
Also, one thing that I observed was in all these drawings and collages, the use of software was so meager. But these days, uh, I just feel when, like, as a student, when we start like thinking, sometimes we start thinking from the software, and there are just like the software is a brain of its own. So, like it's like we let the software command us and guide us in designing these buildings, and then all of them start looking similar. But rather, if we stick to hand drawings and hand drawings and like express a thought entirely, i I think the buildings can be a little more expressive and like true to ourselves and our thoughts.
So my generation had to learn how to make a pencil do what you want it to do, or learn how to make friends with a pencil. Your generation will have to do the same with software. That it should make things. So there must be ways. I'm not a software person. I'm too old to learn all those things. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So, and I don't care about learning them anyway. So, but I'm sure, like what Riaz was doing with excavation, it could be done with simple program like SketchUp even, rather than taking linear elements and building up space out of that. Suppose you started with a block, which is like the world, 8 stories. Put the whole block over the whole site and then start removing stuff and remove. And what will you get? You'll get something fantastic actually. So do that kind of thing as something like Pakka.
But it also, Professor Chai, ties up with something to do with skill. And there's a time when the tool controls us because we don't have enough control, we don't have practice. I remember the pencil, of course, the pencil doing its own thing, the line thickness changing when the pencil wanted. You tried a lot to keep the line weight constant and all of that. And then you just did till you had control over it. And I think that it's similar with the other tools. And it does, and that is not to say that it's the relationship with the tool is the same. And you might want to kind of, as we often like to do, is inject the hand into the tool in order to kind of get a certain quality which the tool perhaps does not allow us at a certain point. But I told you that the underlay for those drawings were all from SketchUp. And at that time it was fine. Now you might be using Rhino. You may be able to explore geometries that you cannot do with the hand as easily, or you can actually do with the hand very easily. And you might just want to scan it and take it into it. So there are all these things that has to be, that sense of play has to go through the tool as well. And I think that's the important thing. I remember that I know that the story about Gary, that before computers could do the kind of stuff, he would just make huge odd shaped thermocol models and slice them into slices of bread and then scan each of them and then work out what that thing was. And I know Doshi did this also. But that's a way of using different types of tools at different times. And I think it comes from skill and also the sense of play, and also what you are after in the project and what character you want to bring in the representation, what thoughts you want to express.
I think all these discussions are also taking me back to Ghulam Mohammadji's work, where I think the medium that he started off with, his initial slides were of a similar medium, and somewhere towards the end, there was something of the Ahmedabad, the city Gandhi left behind.
that project was a completely composite work which had different surfaces and was pretty interesting. So I think I remember having this question at that point also, wherein does all this thought process come with the idea or the image of the painting, or does that or the painting comes first and then the materiality comes after? So does this thought go hand in hand? Does material become a very tangible tool to put that imagery out? And when things shift like this, when there's a different material used for the same for another representation, I wonder what the instigative thought is, that how does he decide on the material? Like, I mean, something I think even we were struggling with when we were working together. We're like, what medium do we use? Should we do a zine? Should we do a section? Should we do a plan? And we
You should do
felt
plans
at
and
some
sections.
point.
You should do
Sorry?
plans and sections. You should do plans and sections. I'm quite clear about that. But even Sheikh, he has he's gone into the digital drawing and painting, and now he does a lot of work digitally, in which he uses scans, he uses photographs, he paints into it. I mean, on the screen, and he does all of that. The process is different from his earlier painting process, where oils or other media were used, where he talked about, for example, casein as a material for doing that work in China. But the purpose is always to try and pull things together. That the coherence of the total image is only achieved by pushing and pulling at things, whatever they are. Who cares whether you do this or that? Do it with gobar if you like. Who cares? Or do it with paper collage, or draw with anything. I don't care, but bring a possibility of entering what you have made in my imagination. Then you are testing out your ideas. Your ideas are wonderful, but they have to come to this stage for them to be tested. Otherwise, we can keep on talking, we can make magazines, and we can make all kinds of things. There are so many nice things. Good, very good. We'll make zines also, not to worry. They are byproducts. If there were lots of other students who were not architects, then the studio would have had to take a different model of thought. But since almost all of you are architects, I think all are architects now, this is a chance to build it to that. Also, when Sudipto and Riaz started the studio and they came and discussed, they said, we want to give a message through a creative process, not through a discursive process. That's why I joined the studio, because I'm tired of discursive stuff. You get tired. I'm 70 years old soon. My tire is, but I'm not tired, not at all. But I get tired of all this. Tell me to write it, I'll write it, but it will be in crisp, short sentences. But make, Baba.
Just I have one more question here, because when you're saying, like, when in the process of learning, how to dissociate the process. I mean, I'm saying process of learning. Okay, when we are learning, how to dissociate the process with this spontaneous unfolding.
No, there is no dissociation. It is exactly the same. This is the real process. The other is the collection afterwards. There is a before and an after to every meal that you cook or to anything that you make. The before is collecting the ingredients and arranging them in due order. Then there is the cooking, and then there is the enjoying. At enjoyment time, you can talk about this shikhand was too sweet and the curry was not correct. You can talk like that. But in the making, you cannot talk, you have to make. It is all part of the learning process. And there is no dissociation involved. It is the operation of the mind, body, spirit complex, which takes its own forms at the relevant moments. But we tend to give more weight, or we get stuck somewhere in one place, in one of the processes. Yeah? And the way to get out of it is to be mischievously playful. The other day, Vikram Prakash asked Doshi, yogi or acrobat? That's because Doshi had written that one essay, The Yogi and the Acrobat, calling Khan the yogi and Corbusier the acrobat. And Doshi refused to answer that question. He just talked about something completely different. He never answered it. He talked about some in Pune in childhood, something. I don't know what. So that was a very good way of completely avoiding dissecting yourself. Never dissect yourself. Do it. And it goes.
He also very cleverly stepped away from a question regarding clarity and confusion. He didn't want to sort of...
Yeah, but I think in the example what he's giving, yes, it's like, I mean, yeah, dissection, again, coming from mental thinking, too much of overthinking, trying to analyze. So, that completely, yeah.
No. See, most important thing, be happy with what you are. And then move. And then something comes out, I tell you, without any problem. And then bash it this way, that way, twist it, do things to it, and enjoy that. And then when you're doing it in a group, then it's even more like, 6, 7 people in an office. And they are all different kinds of minds, And that happens in your groups also. And you'll get great fun out of pushing something that somebody had put and say, no, it has to go back that much. And the other guy comes and says, no. And that process will be something.
My group members here would certainly, I mean, I'm really having a lot of fun there. But at the same time, it's sometimes it's so easy to comment on what we perceive as whole from the others instead of, to be able to reach to that level yourself.
No, but you see, the thing is, you should not comment. What you should do is say, this should really be so far away, or it should be smaller. See, I'll show you, I'll put. And then the other person has to put something bigger. And then it is the thing itself which is creating the dialogue rather than concepts about the thing. Mm-hmm. Most of the time in this stage, do not allow referencing to external things, only to what is on the board.
I also think that, there's a kind of there has to be a certain equivalence of action in that group work. And I tend to use these very difficult phrases, but let me try and simplify it. What I mean is everybody has to work in the same space. You can't have somebody who is passing comments and somebody who is drawing. Everybody is making, the actual labor and the resistance you get, to drawing is different. There's very little resistance to words. I have this, often have this experience that in my mind, when I'm putting together something that we would call a concept, it feels fantastic. It feels like it's miraculous how it's coming together in the head. And then you put it on a sketch, and the drawing asks you for commitments to dimension and scale and a certain kind of aesthetic quality, which you realize you had nothing of that in your head. And so then you shape that idea hoping to get that commitment sorted out. And then that sketch goes to somebody who has to draft it. And when that draft comes back, it looks like shit. Okay, and you realize like it had nothing of that original. And the thing is to say, and a lot of times with students, what I sense is that they give up then and there. They say, oh, the idea itself was not, but it has to come back, and you've got to kind of rework it in the sketch, in your head, back on sketch, back on draft, and that process, and everybody has to be doing it. Because if one person is thinking, then they think, yeah, what are you struggling about? And as a boss, often I think, yeah, why are you having so much trouble drawing this up? I thought it out all in my head. If everybody is on the paper, then everybody is on the paper. It can't be that some people are thinking and some people are drawing. Yes, you can start coordinating that and make a game out of it, because at some point somebody has to move away and come in. But I'm saying that if you are passing comments, or if somebody is in the work of a sketch and somebody else has got another commitment, then that relationship has to be clear. So my sense is one has to all be in that space so that there's a kind of flow to it.
I guess I completely misintroduced myself. Yeah, I mean, not in a bad manner. I wasn't passing comments from the point of authority.
No, I wasn't. No, I know. I'm not necessarily saying that. It just came out as in. It occurred to me that that when one is working as a common at that playing table, the rules of the game have to be common. Otherwise, you're not playing the same game.
The point you are saying is very valid. I mean, what I said was it was an extension to Chaya sir, probably in a more. I was trying to be probably funny, and I just hit myself in the process of doing that. But
in this process where everybody is drawing, there are some parts which are very boring. Like in Riaz's project, the people who were drawing those C-shaped office blocks, they had the most boring task. Yes. And there were these people who were making the carved out land and all that. And they could use pastel, and so they had fun part. And this kind of thing happens, that the labor, you go into a classical music concert and poor tabla player, he's not supposed to make a lot of noise. Nowadays they've started doing, fast and showing off and all that. But a good tabla player is supposed to follow the main musician and just keep chup. So there are people who have to do chup work. And there are people who will be sort of flying away and doing things. And then it is time to sometimes change over. So at the beginning, when you start drawing, I found that it's a very interesting idea to have 3-4 different parts. Each one somebody can work on. And then the boring part, people get to work on the other part, which is more enjoyable at times. And that way, that sense of working together will also have a very pleasurable effect. And that, I think, is, of course, there will be some cases like somebody will be very good at SketchUp and somebody will be very good at, something else. And all work of SketchUp will go to that person only. But that is, well, the punishment for developing a skill is that you are asked to do only that. But it's worth it. It's a different sociology. So Aryaman, you're peering out of that cut in the paper. What did you think about these things?
Sorry?
No, I'm just asking, you think that we are ready to get into the making stage? I'm asking.
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay, good. What about others?
So do you think,
sorry.
do you think they should, because Majnu Katela is still working on it, and Smita, will you give us an idea of when you think you'll be able to pass it on to the next group?
In a few hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think they should pass it on and then people work? Because one group will be deprived for 3 to 4 months, but the others can start working.
Yeah, I think so.
And so what will be the next, if you can articulate for us, what could be the next process of becoming users and then to kind of put this all together?
So you had written the core values and it had gone to an architect, and that architect has sent you back some drawings. Now you have decided that actually you yourself will have to do the architecture. And in that you'll have to take into consideration how you think people may use this space. I think that's about it. And then make it into an architecture.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
So we ref to Wiggy's drawing regarding the cycles, and you have to send it 2 steps back, right? You have to send it back to the person who gave you the thing. Nish, can you just tell us who gets what, who sends out to what? Do you have that sketch handy?
Sorry, say that again, Sudipto. I was just on the call.
Okay, sorry. I've got the sketch handy, so I'll just bring it up. Here we are. So Kotla got it from Majnu Katila. I mean, Majnu Katila had sent their core values document to Meroli, who then worked on it and sent it to Kotla. So Kotla sends it back to Majnu Katila. Okay. And yeah, so you just move it one forward, I guess. Meroli sends it to Kotla, Kotla sends it to Majnu Katila sends it to Meroli, and Daryaganj sends it to Dholakua, Dholakua sends it to Kakanagar, and Kakanagar sends it back to Daryaganj.
No, Sudipto, I think we'll have to, if you want it to go to the original person, we'll have to go back, not go front. Because if you're going front, then we'll have to go twice. Because Kakanagar got it from Dholakua.
Oh, I see. So it is not gone twice forward. It's only gone
once.
once.
It's just gone once. So either we go back or we send it to Daryaganj, and then Dholakua necessarily doesn't get, they get only by presenting the final thing, they get a sense of what's happened. So we could do either way. Either it goes back or it
I think it goes back in that case.
Yeah, it has to go back.
Okay.
That is the only ethical way.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So send it back to the people you got it from.
No, not you got it from, but the earlier group got it from. Am I right? Because, see, Kakanagar sent their work to whom first, in first instance?
Daryaganj.
Daryaganj. Then Daryaganj sent it to whom?
Dholakua.
Dholakua. So now Dholakua will have to send it back to Kakanagar.
No, but
Send it to
Daryaganj hasn't
Dholakua.
sent it to Dholakua. No? Daryaganj is working on it now.
Yes,
You
yes,
guys
yes.
got, yeah, so it is just moved once.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay.
So
Fine.
we got
So you
So
send
it
it back.
Go back to the
back to
people.
Kakanagar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Daryaganj will send it to Kakanagar and Kakanagar will send it to Dholakua and Dholakua to Daryaganj.
Yeah, so basically it goes back to who you've got it from as an offering. Yes.
Okay. We meet later then. I think we can close this session.
Yes.
Yeah. And people, we can put up, I mean, if you guys want discussions, please put it up whenever you all need, and we'll be happy to come in between all the instructors. I think we can be almost continuously with you all as you all need through this week. So do put up, I mean, we'll adjust as we go along.
So what is the mentor cycle like? Does that go back or forward?
I think it's going to be a bit more, how would you say, opportunistic than that. We'll have to play it by ear as to who is available at various times. But as far as possible, all of us will discuss with all the groups.
A very good tactic is to call in one instructor and then discuss with him. Then after a while, call in another instructor. And when discussing with him, always use the earlier instructor as the scapegoat. That he said like this, so, and I think you can create a mess amongst the instructors also. And that's a great thing. I mean, when that happens, Riaz, we'll really have reached a School of Architecture stage.
That's right.
It was already happening to some extent.
What we used to try regularly to try and do to Doshi, but never managed. Never managed.
Yeah. Okay. See you.
Yeah.